Afternoon, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, Peter. Nice to meet you.
And you. Welcome to the Business Spotlight. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me this afternoon. Can you start by telling me a little about yourself and your background and your business, please?
Yeah, so graduated in 1994 as a graphic designer. It was one of the infamous recessions back then. So whilst I thought I was going to stay in England, ended up moving back here. Spent the summer trying to find work, and then by November I had my first job and worked for a couple of design agencies in Belfast. Before I always knew I wanted to set up my own business. Always knew I wanted to work for myself. So then finally took the leap in 2002. Long-suffering wife, long-suffering children, everybody's heavily invested in the business. And my wife works in here with me as well, 2 days a week. So it's really grown over the last 22 years to be where we are now. And the whole team really enjoys everything we do. So we're an interpretive design company. We design museums and visitor experiences, concentrating mainly on the island of Ireland. We have done projects in England, but really decided probably at midpoint that we want to specialize on the island and work here predominantly.
And how did you end up going from the graphic design and the design to niching into the experience and museum side of things? That's an interesting.
Yeah, so I think I'll blame my parents. We spent our summers in France touring battlefields and castles. And I remember, I think I was probably 8 years old, going around an exhibition about Joan of Arc. It was all in French. I didn't understand what was going on, but I remember walking into this room and it was a terrible 1970s piece of set work and this bad mannequin and a sound and light show of her being burnt. I remember thinking, they did that to this amazing woman and the shock of it. And I don't know whether that triggered something back then, but whenever I started working my own business, doing the graphic design, I then met a guy who worked for the council at that point, and he had asked me why we hadn't gone for particular tender. And I said, well, because we're not qualified. It's not what we do. He said, you do this day in, day out. We know you do. Next time something comes like that, make sure you tender for it. And that was next one came out was for Thompson Dock in Belfast. And we launched that in 2008. And that was our first big heritage project. We'd always done heritage projects, but that's the first time we actually started doing something of scale and of note. So that kind of tipped us in a way to knowing that there was, this is something I really thrived on doing. And also at this stage, there was rumblings of this big project that was going to happen in Belfast in 2012 around Titanic. And I thought, if that's happening here, I want to be part of that. So I really then steered the company to do more and more of the heritage and interpretation work. And then lucky enough, we're one of the teams to work on Titanic Belfast. And since then, we literally have not had time to look back.
Fantastic. And the Thompson Dock, is that the dry dock they've opened up? Oh, right.
That's where the whiskey distillery is now. So they've yeah.
And so what was the spark, Andrew, and first of all, congratulations, 22 years, terrific tenure, only just started.
I'm warming up.
What was the spark that led you to actually launch the business?
It's one of those things. I'm a youngest child of three boys. I don't know sometimes whether I just was oblivious to life going on around me, but it was something I always wanted to do. It's the same as I remember my two older brothers went to university in England. I remember waking up in Liverpool on my first morning at university in Liverpool going, how did I get here? But it's just, I was almost an autopilot because my brothers were doing these things. So I just followed. And then I used to have a business partner and we worked together for a couple of years and we talked a lot about doing this. And then my then fiance turned around to me and said, would you two ever stop talking about it and just get on and do it? So that was kind of probably the kick up the backside that I needed, was just stop talking, start doing.
And so the market that you've niched into now, so you said, so across the island of Ireland. So who is it that you deal with? Is it public bodies? Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, so it's predominantly public bodies. And again, even on that front, I remember when we first set up, there was one other company in Dublin called Martello Media, a fabulous guy called Mark Leslie. And sadly, their company's now demised. But he said to me very early on when I met him, he said, forget your local market. You have to work further afield for your local market, especially in Northern Ireland, to appreciate who you are. And I said, well, how bad can it be? And we started going for projects in Northern Ireland, just weren't getting them. They were always going for the international companies, or, there's one in New York, a few in London. that they were getting the work here. So we actually fortuitously started getting more work in the south. And that was for the likes of Office Public Works, National Monuments, Fáilte Ireland. And we have now built a reputation down there of real size. Went straight from Titanic Belfast to work in King John's Castle in Limerick. So we went from our biggest solo project value of about 250,000 to the next project down south was 3.6 million. And that was in one leap. And then we just worked and worked and worked. It took about a year after that for the visitor numbers to start showing that what we'd done worked. And then we started getting all the work we could handle in the south. And this is the first year in 22 years we've now got more work in the north than we have in the south. So
Right.
that's been a long route. So it is mainly all government institutions. So we work a lot of councils up here. Tourism and I is one of the funders. Obviously, we do lots of presentations, updates to them. We've gone from doing a lot of the sort of small to medium-sized projects, working as a sole operator, now to being on much bigger teams with architects, bigger project management, civil engineers. So we can go for much bigger projects now as a collective. So, but yeah, it's very, very few private sector now. There's a few that we do bits and bobs. So the Hastings Hotel Group, Howard Hastings has always been a great champion of our heritage, and we've done some lovely work with him, and he's a great client. He's a great one for trusting you to do what you need to do.
Very good. And what would you say has been your biggest lesson as a business owner, Andrew?
To know that you're never there. I would say when I set up, my mother-in-law after the first year said, "Well, that's the first year done. You pleased?" I said, "No, no, 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 no," because I know most small businesses fail within the first 3 years. So to ask me again in 2 years' time, so year 3, she said, "You've got the 3 years. Are you happy now?" And I said, "No, no, 5 years." She asked me, "No." I said, 10 years. Got to 10 years, said, "Surely you're happy now." I said, "No, I've realized that you're never, ever there. You will always be trying to improve, trying to self-evaluate, trying to get better. World changes. If you think what it was like in 2002, internet was still relatively new. Mobile phones, not everybody had one. People use fax machines. People had dial-up internet. So things change significantly year on year, and therefore, as a company, you have to just try and stay on top of things.
Yeah, I'd love to say I remember my dad telling me about that, but I think we both know that would be an utter lie. And so, no pun intended, but how do you draw the line between the passion for design and heritage and business owner, which are different roles?
That's probably my biggest feeling, is the fact that we're probably too passionate about what we do, and we care too much about what we do. And also because there's not like a governing institution that explains what interpretive designers do, it's very hard to explain to clients. These are all the stages, because we actually follow what's called the RIBA stages, the Royal Institute of British Architecture, which means it works for us to be able to align to builders and architects and mechanical, electrical engineers. So it helps us explain to the client all of our stages. But it's very hard. The analogy I always give: mechanical engineer does what they got to do, electrical engineer does what they have to do. They've got one role, one task within a project. Interpretive planning, we have interpretive planning project manager, spatial design, technical design, graphic design, content creation, interpretive consultant. We've got multiple roles, but because it's all under interpretive designer, it's very hard to explain our fees. So quite often we have to really battle to explain our fee structure. And even then, we always tend to go over, because we probably put too much of ourselves into the project. I've always said we could probably become more profitable if we were more efficient and didn't do things to standard we did, but I would say we'd be gone in 5 years, because you're only as good, it's the old adage, you're only as good as your last job, and we're only as good as the visitor numbers going to places we design and the feedback they give. And we've had multiple projects so National Family Museum we launched last year in Strokestown, which is reinterpreting the story of the Great Hunger in Ireland to make it as relevant today as it was 30 years ago when they told the story, 170 years ago when it happened. With a tight budget from the client to work on, with huge national expectations, but the feedback from the experience has been phenomenal, way beyond anybody's expectations. So we did go over budget, but we also know that'll get us more work because it's of such national significance. So it's a fine line between. I'm not a great business owner. I'm a very passionate designer. I don't think necessarily creativity and business they kind of like a yin. You're not yin and yang. The poles apart. They push each other away. So it's always trying to walk that tightrope.
And are there any business owners or business leaders that have influenced you or that have caught your attention over the years?
Yeah, there's two that absolutely stand out. Wayne Hemingway, who set up Red or Dead and then sold it for a great sum. But I've heard him speak twice, and he is brilliant at just cutting through the flannel. He just says as it is. And I've been in rooms with councillors and government people when Wayne Hemingway was talking, and you can actually feel them all go. They just. But he sometimes he's the breath of fresh air that people need to hear, because actually the way because he does a lot of from Red or Dead now, he does a lot of urban planning and public projects where it's all about improving the spaces we're in and how we live and influence in society. So a lot of it filters down to where we work. So actually looking at his analysis, looking at some of the projects he's done, helps us benchmark. And the fact that then he also just cuts to the chase. He's actually going to be one of the designers on the Bangor project, the City Deal project over the next few years. So it's really nice for him to be actually involved in the project here. And so he's brilliant. And if you ever get a chance to hear him speak, I'd just put your thick skin on and go and listen to him. Another guy was, I can never pronounce his surname properly, but Yvon Chouinard, who set up Patagonia. If you ever want to read a really good book, Let My People Go Surfing. His book he wrote about how he got into Patagonia, developed Patagonia, and ultimately has put it all into trust now to make sure that the work they have done continues to do what they do. So a quick example of why he's an absolute legend is, long story short, opened a new store. All the staff started getting headaches in the first few weeks of the store opening. Couldn't understand why. And then eventually realized when they were unpacking the clothes, they were off-gassing. And the air conditioning wasn't working, and the air was just reflowing all this off gassing. And that's what, so most business owners would go, okay, great, get the air conditioning fixed, job done. But he said, why are my clothes off gassing? And he said, well, it's because of the chemicals used to bleach the cotton and get the cotton down to a way that we can actually dye it. I said, well, why do we have to use cotton like that? Can we not use organic cotton? And his buyers and I said, actually, there's not enough organic cotton in the world to meet our needs. And he said, well, what'll it take to make that happen? He said, well, we'd have to subsidize all the farmers for 3 years. So they'd go from chemically controlled to organic cotton. And we just can't afford to do it. And he said, we can't afford not to do it. So he paid farmers for 3 years. And 3 years to the day, he was organic, 100% cotton within his business.
Wow.
It's just having that absolute courage of your convictions to go for it and to risk it all just on knowing what was right. So brilliant book, brilliant book.
Very good. Great story. Great share. Thank you. And well, speaking of books, if you were on a desert island and you had a choice of either a book or a podcast or both, what would you choose to read / listen to?
Can I choose 2 books?
Yes, by all means.
This is not because I love old stuff, as my wife calls it. It's not because I'm into heritage, not because the world we're working, but it's actually 2 quite old books. One of them, the classic story, a couple, Orla said to her husband Rusty, go and get Andrew a birthday present. He's from Yorkshire, so he went to Oxfam, browsed the books and bought me the book that he thought I'd like the look of. He thought he bought 99p. His wife was raging, but I read it. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's called The Magus, or Magus. It's written in 1965 by a guy called John Fowles, who it is a superb book. It's set on an island of a young graduate off, and he gets drawn into this dark and mysterious world. You literally live every single moment with that young graduate until the very end. At the end of it, it probably it's still, I read it maybe 10 years ago. I still think about that book. I still think about the ending and where is he now and things. So it's from a novel point of view, it is. And then what's nice actually is speaking to my mum about it, because she's a big book reader. I said, have you ever read it? She went, oh yeah, I read that back in the 50s. I read it back in 1965 when it was published. I'll maybe reread it. So she reread it, 40, 45 years later, and absolutely loved it again. So it's brilliant. So that's a good novel. The other book I read last year was called The Old Patagonian Express. by Paul Thoreau, written in 1979, where he decides that he's a travel writer and he's getting really annoyed with all the new travel writers coming out in the late 70s. And their opening line is always, "As I fly in over the island." And he realizes people are losing the art of travel because it's all going to jet flights and people just taking off landing. So he decides just where he's going to go. He puts a pin in the map, Patagonia. So he says, right, I'm going to go there by train. And he takes months to travel down through America, down through Mexico, down through South America, has to change his routes because of a couple of civil wars and riots. And he literally, the last page of the book, he walks onto the plains of Patagonia and you are there with him. You are literally, you just feel that you're standing beside him as his journey ends. It is beautifully written. It's just, I actually find myself Googling then the cities he'd been to, the towns he'd been to, see how they changed compared to when he was there. But just for us as creatives, to be able to create that moment that as a reader, I was standing beside him, is something we try to emulate when we're working about how can we create an emotional response to a written word or a physical experience. So those were my two books that are definitely, there's a load of others, but those, if I had to choose, I'd probably narrow it down to those two.
Very good, great shares. And if you could go back in time, Andrew, and give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that sound like?
It would definitely be honest, be true, do not flannel, do not mix stuff up. If you don't know something, say you don't know it, go and find out how to answer it, and then come back with the answer. I think as a ethos within Tandem, we've always believed in just asking as many questions as we can. I remember years ago sitting in a porta cabin on the building site in King John's Castle, and big table of big hairy builders and engineers and project managers all going like this, and somebody's chatting away. And the mechanical guy said, "Oh well, we can't do that because Series 3000 EP14 isn't ready." Everybody furiously wrote that down, but our project manager, a young graduate, Helen, was sitting around the table, and she just turned around and said, "Sorry, does that affect us? I don't know what that is. What is a Series 3000?" And everybody kind of looked at her as if to, and the mechanical guy turned around, explained what it was. And what you saw is all the big guys around the table get their pens out and write it down because they didn't have a clue either. They were just going along. So it's about just, if you don't know something, just be honest, because I think people appreciate the honesty and the reassurance that gives to people as you talk through. I think it's critical. Like there's, especially we're in the creative world, we need to take people on the journey with us because we do this day in, day out. We have to remember that a lot of people's jobs aren't the same as ours. So we have to explain simple terms that we use every day to everybody so that we really take everybody there with this. So on opening day, there's no, I didn't think it was going to look like that. Everybody knows expectations are managed. So it's definitely be honest, but be patient as well. Don't try and run, people say, so I set this up when I was 30, so I've given away my age now. But I don't think we would be here if I set up when I was 25. Definitely not if I was 23. What I learned from working from other people and listening to them was absolutely critical to set my own business. And I'll never forget my last person I worked for. I left in the morning and he just said, "Andrew, cash flow is king. Cash flow is king." And that was his parting words. And that, yeah, never a truer word spoken for somebody running the business.
Very good. And if we look forward now, we've got what, a third of 2024 is gone now. As you look forward to the remainder of this year and beyond, what are you most excited about?
The projects we have in the north, it's just so nice to actually, if I look out my window, I can pretty much see one of them here working Carrickfergus, the regeneration project, which is taking us from now until 2029. We're working a brilliant, large, extended team for it. When we had the kickoff meeting for that, the week before, I'd been down to Hook Lighthouse in Wexford, which is about 5.5 hour drive, 5.5 hour drive back, 15 minutes around to Carrick, 15 minutes back. It's not just with the traveling, it's because we're going to be able to do something locally that people will see, because so often people ask me what I do and I say, "Oh, Hook Lighthouse or King John's Castle or Cork Harbour." They'll never go there. Whereas, here I'll be able to say, yeah, we did that. That's something we've actually affected real change locally. But as I say, that's 2029 before it's finished. We're working on a few other really large projects. DNA Museum in Derry, we started working on 2015. So another couple of years, that'll be opening. So it's really good now to be working in the north, have that reputation, have that work. Equally, I love all the work we're doing in the south as well, because we're very much an all-island company. I suppose it's working locally for once is quite refreshing, and working with local teams, it's lovely.
And if somebody likes what they've heard and would be interested in reaching out or getting in touch with you or Tandem Design, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Probably just through our website, just tandemdesign.co.uk. It shows what we do, explains what we do, shows some of the projects we've done in the past, and then we've got our hello@ email address on there. So, yeah, so it's a great world to work in. We're very, very privileged doing what we do, and every day is different. I remember when my kids were growing up, it was a case of you come home and they say, "Where have you been today, Dad?" And I was out in the Commission of Irish Lights ship overnight in Wicklow Bay, or I was up in Cathedral or down at Cave. So yeah, so I'm always one for saying I would rather talk to people earlier on in project life cycles, or if they're looking for advice on certain things, than too late when money's been spent or mistakes been made. Because I think Northern Ireland as a whole, we can learn so much off each other. Historically, we're quite guarded. We don't necessarily like talking to each other, especially in the creative industries. It's kind of like, "Oh, what are you doing? I'm not going to tell you." I just think Northern Ireland as a country punches above its weight on a regular basis, and we could do so much more. And we need to do so much more to keep more people staying here and wanting to work here, and realize that what we've actually got here is superb. Because for too long, the default is to go to England or to go to Scotland and then not come back. Whereas actually one of our biggest challenges is actually recruitment, trying to get people to work here and stay here and believe that, what it is they say in Windsor, our wee country is a good wee country. And it's just actually believing that self-belief. We don't, as a nation, we don't really have that much self-belief, but we should have. So I'm always happy to try and champion that and encourage people to see the positivities about here.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. So Andrew Todd from Tandem Design, thanks very much for sharing your story and your passion and your journey. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I wish you every success for the remainder of 2024 and beyond. Andrew, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Lovely to talk.